5 yards. That's all it took for Mel Blount to break football as everyone knew it. In the savage world of 1970s NFL defenses, he wasn't just the Steelers' enforcer, he was the reason receivers feared the line of scrimmage. 4 Super Bowls in 6 years, 11 interceptions in a single season, and a style so relentless the league had to create a new rule just to rein him in. They called it the Mel Blount rule. And it didn't just change a man, it changed the entire sport. But was it really just about one corner? Or did those 5 yards redraw every offensive blueprint that came after? Here's how the rule that targeted Mel Blount rewired the NFL forever. Winter in Pittsburgh didn't just chill your bones, it froze the football field into a slab of concrete. The 1970s NFL was a world of mud, smoke, and collisions that echoed through empty steel mills. Offenses lined up run first, hoping to grind out 4 yards at a time, but defenses like the Steelers' Steel Curtain turned every Sunday into a survival test. Mean Joe Green, Jack Ham, Jack Lambert, names that still sound like a dare. But in the secondary, Mel Blount was the one who made wide receivers question their career choices. Blount didn't look like a cornerback. At 6'3", with arms that seemed to stretch across the hash marks, he lined up with a cold stare and a farmhand's grip. Born the youngest of 11 on a patch of Georgia dirt, raised on chores and competition. He brought that edge to Southern University, then to the NFL in 1970, drafted in the 3rd round by a team already building its legend. The Steelers were about to win 4 Super Bowls in 6 years, and Blount would be on the field for every one. The rules gave defenders free rein. Before 1978, a corner could ride a receiver down the field, hands on, hip to hip, all the way until the quarterback let the ball go. Receivers called it a fist fight just to get off the line. Andy Russell, a linebacker on those teams, put it plain. He would manhandle the wide receivers, take them, and throw them out of bounds. If you couldn't break free, the passing game was dead on arrival. Comebacks were rare, and quarterbacks had to pray their guys could survive the first 5 yards. In 1975, Blount didn't just bully receivers. He took the ball away, too. 11 interceptions. Defensive Player of the Year. The first corner to ever win it. That wasn't luck. It was anticipation, timing, and a talent for reading routes that made quarterbacks nervous. Jack Ham, another Hall of Famer, said it best. When you create a cornerback, the mold is Mel Blount. Every snap, every breath in that cold air felt like a dare. The Steelers' defense didn't just stop drives. They set the tone for the entire league. If you couldn't release, you couldn't pass. And if you couldn't pass, you couldn't win. That was the world before the rule, and Mel Blount was its gatekeeper. Mel Blount didn't just show up and start bullying receivers. He built his craft like a welder shaping steel. Every snap began with a stance. Inside foot back, knees bent, weight balanced and ready to explode. He locked his eyes on the sternum, not the head or shoulders, because hips don't lie and the first fake is always a trap. One misread and a receiver could slip by, but Blount's discipline meant he rarely bit. When the ball snapped, his hands fired out, 2-hand shock, right to the chest plate. The first punch wasn't just to slow a receiver, it was to reset the entire route. Receivers called it a car crash at the line, but this wasn't reckless violence. It was measured, like a boxer's jab. Forceful enough to stagger, controlled enough to recover. If the receiver fought through, Blount reloaded his hands, riding the stem without grabbing, using his length to steer and delay. His hips didn't open early. He shuffled, mirrored, and waited for the receiver to declare his direction. That patience forced quarterbacks to wait, and in the 1970s, waiting meant the pocket might collapse before a route ever developed. Quarterbacks running timing offenses found their clocks shattered. A slant that should have taken 1.8 seconds now took 3, and by then, Jack Lambert or Mean Joe Green was already in the backfield. Blount's jam didn't just disrupt, it destroyed the rhythm of entire passing games. The best receivers tried everything: tighter splits, quick motion, rocker steps at the line. Some would even cheat the alignment, hoping to avoid the full force of that first hit. But most counters failed. Blount's reach erased separation, and his anticipation made even double moves feel like running in quicksand. Cliff Branch, one of the fastest men in football, called Blount the only corner who could turn a go route into a wrestling match. But the real edge was psychological. Receivers lined up knowing pain was coming. Every snap became a test of nerve as much as skill. Some tried to fight back, but Blount thrived on that energy. He wanted you thinking about his hands, not your route. He wanted you second-guessing your release, feeling the weight of his shadow before the ball even left the quarterback's hand. This wasn't just muscle and menace. It was a science, a manual passed down in the Steelers' secondary, drilled in full pads, perfected over 1,000 reps. Inside footback, eyes on the chest, shock with both hands, ride the hip, finish through the hands at the catch point. It was legal, it was ruthless, and it forced the league to reconsider what defense could be. For offenses, it was a puzzle with no answer, at least not until the rules changed. In the spring of 1978, the NFL owners gathered to vote on a pair of changes that would redraw the blueprints for offense and defense. The first was clear and direct. Within the area 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, a defensive player may chuck an eligible receiver in front of him. Continuous and unbroken contact within the 5-yard zone, so long as the receiver has not moved beyond a point, even with the defender. But beyond that 5-yard line, the old rules were gone. Now, any contact before the ball left the quarterback's hand would cost the defense 5 yards and hand the offense an automatic first down. The language was precise for a reason. The competition committee, led by Don Shula and Paul Brown, wanted to make sure there was no confusion. Defenders could still play tough at the line, but the mugging and manhandling that defined the previous decade had to stop at 5 yards. Pete Rozelle, the commissioner, called the new rule a step toward balance and excitement. In committee minutes, Shula pointed to games where teams couldn't move the ball through the air, where comebacks were impossible, and where TV audiences tuned out long before the final whistle. The league's scoring average had dropped to just over 17 points per team in 1977, and network partners were pushing hard for more action and more drama. But the change didn't stop with defensive backs. In the same meeting, owners voted to let offensive linemen use open hands and extended arms in pass protection. The official wording: offensive players may use open hands to block, provided hands stay within defender's frame and do not grasp, encircle, or pull. Before that, linemen had to keep their hands tight to their chest, fighting off pass rushers with their forearms and shoulders. Now, the pocket could be wider, cleaner, and quarterbacks could finally breathe. Paul Brown, a voice for offensive innovation, argued that if defenders were losing their freedom to jam receivers, then offenses needed new tools to protect the passer. The two rules were a package deal, each one amplifying the other. The debates were heated. Defensive-minded coaches, especially from Pittsburgh, argued the rule would penalize strong, technical defense. Al Davis and others warned that the league was softening the game. But the numbers didn't lie. Ratings had dipped, and the NFL's own research showed that games with more passing and late comebacks kept fans glued to their screens. Rozelle and Shula had the votes, and the rules sailed through. Art McNally, head of officiating, spent the summer retraining referees, using hours of film to show exactly where the new line was drawn. Every coach left the owners' meeting with a memo. The 5-yard zone was now sacred ground, and open hands were the new standard for blocking. By September, the field had changed. For the first time, defenses faced a hard boundary. 5 yards, no more. Any slip, any late hand check, and the flag came out. Offenses, meanwhile, had new ways to keep their quarterback upright. The NFL had drawn a line, not just in the grass, but in the very structure of the game, and the effects would be felt from the first snap of the new season. Flags started flying before the leaves even turned. Opening week of 1978, the Steelers' secondary lined up for business as usual. Press at the line, hands ready, eyes locked. But now, every snap came with a silent countdown. 5 yards. That was it. After that, any contact meant 5 yards and a fresh set of downs for the offense. The first few games felt like a penalty parade. Defensive backs grumbled in meetings, coaches barked about phantom calls, and referees, armed with new training tapes, didn't hesitate to throw the flag. Old habits died hard, especially for corners who'd spent a decade riding receivers all the way down the field. Mel Blount was the face on every coaching clinic chalkboard. The so-called Blount rule wasn't just a headline. It was a warning. For a man who made his living off the jam, there was no time to sulk. He went back to the film room, breaking down releases, measuring steps, studying quarterback eyes. In practice, he started giving a cushion, 3, sometimes 5 yards, inviting quarterbacks to test him. The jam was now a weapon of timing, not a constant. He baited throws, trusted his feet, and leaned on anticipation honed over years of reading routes. The Steelers' DB drills changed overnight. Instead of full-speed collisions, it was all about mirror steps, leverage, and closing speed. Defensive coordinator Bud Carson ran new clinics on off-man technique, teaching corners to read hips from space and break on the ball without grabbing. The old press and turn was still there, but now it lived inside the 5-yard line. After that, it was all about patience and angles. The flag still came, especially in September. In a game against Houston, Blount got hit with 2 illegal contact calls before halftime. But he adjusted. By mid-season, the penalty numbers dropped, and the Steelers' secondary started stealing back possessions the new way. Blount picked off 4 passes in 1978, then 3 more in 1979, numbers that kept him in the Pro Bowl conversation. He wasn't just surviving, he was still dictating terms, just with a different toolkit. League-wide, defensive backs watched Blount's tape, seeing how the best in the business adapted. Coaching clinics filled up with DB coaches dissecting his off-man reps, showing young corners how to win with leverage, not just muscle. The message was clear: adapt or get left behind. The Steelers' defense didn't vanish. They won 2 more Super Bowls after the rule change, with Blount anchoring the back end. His ability to pivot, without losing his edge, became a blueprint for every corner who came after. The Blount rule may have drawn a line in the grass, but it couldn't erase the man's impact. The best defenders found a way. And in Pittsburgh, the standard was still spelled Blount. By 1980, the numbers told the story. Teams were throwing the ball more than ever, over 30 attempts per game, up from just 25 a few years earlier. Passing yards shot past 200 a game, and completion rates climbed from barely 50% to nearly 57%. The old grinded-out Sundays were fading, replaced by quarterbacks firing quick strikes and receivers finding daylight that used to be walled off by hands and forearms. Bill Walsh and the West Coast offense didn't just show up, they took over. Slants and quick outs, timing routes that once got choked off by press coverage, now opened up in rhythm. Quarterbacks like Joe Montana thrived on windows that barely existed before the rule. Defenses scrambled to keep up. Nickel packages, once a specialty call, became a staple. Coaches needed more corners on the field, guys who could mirror, break on the ball, and survive in space without grabbing. The days of the bouncer at the line gave way to the age of the chess player. Defensive backs worked on footwork, anticipation, and leverage. No more riding a receiver down the field. Every snap became a race to win in 5 yards or get beat on the next throw. The whole league felt the altitude change. What started as a line in the grass became a new map for how football was played. 57 interceptions, 4 Super Bowl rings, and a gold jacket in Canton. Mel Blount's resume doesn't need asterisks or footnotes. He played 13 years for Pittsburgh, and no cornerback in team history has picked off more passes. That number still stands, decades after his last snap. Blount didn't just thrive in the era before the 5-yard rule. He made Pro Bowls and all-pro teams after it, outlasting the very rule that tried to contain him. Some say the league wrote his name into the rulebook to slow him down, but the tape tells a different story. He adapted, baited quarterbacks, and kept taking the ball away. That's not a product of old rules. That's Hall of Fame skill. The so-called Blount rule gets all the headlines, but it wasn't just about stopping Mel. The league changed the way offensive linemen could block, too, giving quarterbacks a fighting chance and opening the floodgates for passing records. Still, Blount's style became the blueprint for every big, physical corner who followed. Darrelle Revis, Richard Sherman, Jalen Ramsey, they all borrowed from Blount's playbook, just in a tighter space. The 5-yard line is still the boundary, but the DNA of the position traces straight back to number 47. Would prime Blount dominate today? That's the barbershop argument. Some say the flags would fly. Others say his length, patience, and anticipation would still lock up the league's best. What's certain is this: draw a line across the field, and you redraw the sport. Blount didn't just play in that world. He forced the NFL to invent it. In 1975, Mel Blount intercepted 11 passes, proof his dominance was more than just physical intimidation. The 1978 rule change, documented by the NFL Competition Committee, drew a hard 5-yard line and redefined the sport overnight. Passing yards per game jumped by nearly 25% within 2 seasons, while offenses adopted new timing routes and defenses had to evolve. Blount's 57 career interceptions and Hall of Fame induction show he adapted and excelled even after the rule that bears his name. Yet, the full extent of internal league debates and referee instructions from 1978 remains partially unarchived. Today, every illegal contact flag, every shift in receiver motion, traces back to this pivotal moment. The evidence is clear. Drawing a 5-yard line changed the trajectory of football strategy and how greatness is measured. They didn't nerf a man, they modernized an era.